Captain Yuki Tanaka stood on the observation deck of the orbital station and watched the Concordate ships descend toward Earth. There were 12 of them today, massive vessels with hulls that shimmered like oil on water. They came every month now. They came to take. She pressed her hand against the cold glass and felt the familiar anger rise in her chest. Behind her, the deck was silent. The other officers had learned not to speak during tribute collection. Words felt useless when you could do nothing but watch. The lead ship was already extending its harvesting arms toward the mining platforms in orbit. Rare earth elements, titanium, helium-3, resources that humanity had spent decades learning to gather from space, resources that now belong to the Galactic Concordate. Collection efficiency is at optimal levels, a smooth voice announced over the station speakers. The voice belonged to the Concordate's monitoring system. It had been installed 3 years ago. It watched everything. Earth continues to meet its integration tribute requirements. The Guidance Council commends human cooperation. Tanaka's jaw tightened. Cooperation. That was what they called it. 30 years ago, humanity had celebrated first contact. They had sent messages of peace and friendship into the stars, and the stars had answered. The Galactic Concordat had arrived with gifts and promises. They spoke of a community of over 400 species. They spoke of shared knowledge and mutual prosperity. They welcomed humanity as a provisional species. No one had explained what provisional really meant. The doors behind Tanaka slid open. She turned to see Lieutenant Chen approaching with a tablet in his hands. His face was pale. "Captain," he said quietly, "there's been an incident at the Atacama colony." Tanaka took the tablet and read the report. Her stomach dropped. The Atacama mining settlement had refused to meet its monthly quota. The workers had organized a peaceful protest. They had held signs and sung songs and asked only to keep enough resources to feed their children through the winter. The Concordate's response had been swift. Enforcement drones had dispersed the crowd with neural disruptors. 47 people were in medical facilities. 3 had died. One of them was 16 years old. "We've been ordered to stand down," Chen said. His voice cracked. "The Guidance Council says any interference will be considered a violation of integration protocol." Tanaka handed the tablet back. She looked out the window at the Concordate ships, still harvesting, still taking, and she said nothing. There was nothing to say. That evening, she attended the weekly briefing at Earth Defense Command. The name was a joke now. Earth's defense fleet consisted of 22 ships. The Concordate had thousands. The briefing room was underground, beneath the old city of Geneva, and the walls were lined with screens showing tactical data that no longer mattered. Director Samuel Okonkwo sat at the head of the table. He was 83 years old with white hair and deep lines carved into his dark skin. He had been a diplomat before the Concordate came. He had shaken hands with their representatives and signed the integration agreement. Some people called him a traitor for that. Tanaka knew better. She had seen the classified recordings of those negotiations. She knew that refusal would have meant immediate military occupation. Okonkwo had bought humanity time. The question was whether that time had been wasted. "The Atacama incident has been classified as a civil disturbance," Okonkwo said. His voice was tired. "The Guidance Council has accepted our formal apology and agreed to reduce the penalty assessment to a 15% increase in next month's tribute." Around the table, officers shifted uncomfortably. No one protested. Protest accomplished nothing. "There is another matter," Okonkwo continued. He touched a control, and the screens around the room went dark. "What I am about to share does not leave this room. It does not exist. You will not speak of it, write of it, or think of it outside these walls." Tanaka sat up straighter. In 3 years of briefings, she had never heard Okonkwo speak like this. The old man looked around the table, meeting each officer's eyes in turn. Then he spoke a phrase that meant nothing to Tanaka. "Quiet dawn." The screens flickered back to life. But now they showed something different, something impossible. Tanaka stared at the images. Ships, hundreds of ships, sleek, angular vessels unlike anything in Earth's official fleet. They were hidden in the asteroid belt, tucked into hollowed-out rocks and abandoned mining stations. They were armed with weapons she didn't recognize, and according to the data scrolling across the screens, they were ready. "For 30 years, Okonkwo said softly, we have smiled and bowed and paid our tributes. We have let them believe we were broken. We have let them believe we accepted our chains. He paused. We lied. The room was absolutely silent. Project Quiet Dawn began 6 months after the integration agreement was signed. Every excess resource we could hide, every scientist we could spare, every secret facility we could build, all of it has gone into this. 217 warships. Weapons based on theoretical physics the Concordat abandoned millennia ago. Faster than light drives that exceed their best technology by a factor of 3. Lieutenant Shen found his voice. Sir, if they discover this, they won't. Okonkwo's eyes were hard. They haven't looked. That is their weakness, and it is our greatest weapon. The Concordat has not faced a serious military threat in 6,000 years. Their enforcement fleet is designed to intimidate primitive species, not fight wars. They have forgotten what war looks like. Tanaka's mind was racing. When? She asked. Not yet. Soon, but not yet. We need allies. Okonkwo brought up a new display. It showed dozens of species, each marked with the same designation, service species. We are not the only ones they have chained. The Delth have been paying tribute for 9,000 years, the Morin for 11,000. There are others, many others. They have been broken for so long that they have forgotten how to hope. We must remind them. He stood, and despite his age, there was iron in his spine. In 3 days, the Concordat will make an announcement. Earth's provisional period is ending. We will be designated a permanent service species. Our children and their children and every generation after will be born into bondage. He looked at Tanaka. Unless we choose differently. The meeting ended. Officers filed out in stunned silence. Tanaka remained, staring at the images of the hidden fleet. Okonkwo approached her. Your brother, he said quietly. I know you haven't forgotten. Tanaka's throat tightened. Kenji had been 24 years old. He had been a doctor at a frontier clinic. When the Concordat had come to collect a tribute shipment, he had tried to hide medical supplies needed for his patients. They had made an example of him. I think about him every day, she said. Good. Okonkwo put a hand on her shoulder. Remember that anger, but do not let it control you. When the time comes, we will need clear heads. We will need people who can win a war without becoming monsters. He left her alone with the screens. The next day, Tanaka went about her duties as if nothing had changed. She inspected patrol routes and filed reports, and smiled politely at the Concordat observers who monitored the command center. Inside, her heart was pounding. She found herself watching the observers more closely now. There was one in particular, a young alien from a species called the Kethri. They looked like birds with iridescent feathers and sharp, intelligent eyes. This one was called Zen, and they served as a translator for the Guidance Council. Zen was different from the other Concordat representatives. They seemed uncomfortable during tribute collections. They looked away when enforcement actions were discussed. Once, Tanaka had seen them slip extra food rations to a human worker who had been penalized for low productivity. She filed that observation away. It might be useful later. 3 days passed. The announcement came. High Arbiter Vethka, the insectoid leader of Earth's Guidance Council, broadcast the news from the steps of the old United Nations building. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, with a chitinous body that clicked in word as he spoke. His voice was translated by implants that made his words sound almost gentle. Humanity has proven itself during its provisional period, Vethka declared. Your species has shown admirable capacity for cooperation and contribution. The Galactic Concordat is pleased to welcome Earth as a permanent member of our community. Behind him, human representatives stood in formal attire, smiling for the cameras. They had been told to smile. They had been told what would happen if they didn't. As a service species, Vethka continued, humanity will enjoy the protection and guidance of the Concordat for all generations to come. Your tribute obligations will be formalized. Your development will be supervised. Your future will be secure. Tanaka watched the broadcast from her quarters. She thought about her brother. She thought about the children of Atacama. She thought about 200 ships hidden in the darkness of the asteroid belt. The chains were tightening, but for the first time in 30 years, humanity had the strength to break them. They just had to choose the right moment, and they had to decide what kind of people they would be when the chains finally fell. The asteroid had no official name. On concordate charts, it was labeled as a depleted mining site, abandoned decades ago. No one visited. No one cared. That was exactly the point. Captain Yuki Tanaka stood in the cargo bay of a small transport ship as it descended through a hidden entrance. The rock had been hollowed out over 20 years. What remained was a cathedral of steel and light, filled with the shapes of warships. She counted them as the transport flew past. 10, 20, 50. They hung in zero gravity like sleeping predators, their hulls dark and angular. They looked nothing like concordate vessels. They looked like weapons. Director Okonkwo stood beside her, watching her reaction with careful eyes. "Beautiful, aren't they?" he said. Tanaka couldn't find words. She had spent her career commanding Earth's tiny defense fleet, flying ships that the Concordat considered barely worth monitoring. Now she was looking at something that could change everything. The transport landed on a platform near the asteroid's core. When the doors opened, Tanaka stepped out into a world she hadn't known existed. Engineers moved between the ships, running final checks on systems and weapons. Pilots trained in simulators that mimicked combat scenarios the Concordat had forgotten were possible. Scientists worked on devices that glowed with energies Tanaka didn't recognize. A woman approached them. She was middle-aged with gray streaks in her black hair and grease stains on her uniform. Her name tag read, Dr. Elena Vasquez. "Director," Vasquez said, "and you must be Captain Tanaka. I've heard a lot about you." "Likewise," Tanaka replied. It was true. Vasquez was a legend among those who knew about Quiet Dawn. She had designed the fleets faster-than-light engines. "Your work is remarkable," Vasquez smiled. "The work of thousands of people over 30 years. I just happened to be holding the pen when we finished." She gestured for them to follow. "Let me show you what we built." They walked through corridors carved into the rock, past laboratories and armories and training facilities. Vasquez explained as they went. "The Concordat's technology is old," she said. "Advanced by most standards, but old. They developed their faster-than-light drives 12,000 years ago and never improved them. Why would they? No one could challenge them. They got comfortable." They entered a room filled with holographic displays. Vasquez activated one, showing a comparison between concordate and human ship designs. "Our drives are 3 times faster," she said. "Our weapons use principles they abandoned as impractical millennia ago. We found ways to make them practical. Our shields operate on frequencies they don't know exist." Tanaka studied the displays. "How did we hide all this?" "Carefully." Vasquez pulled up another image, showing a network of hidden facilities across the solar system. "We built inside asteroids, inside moons, inside stations that were officially decommissioned. We used the tribute shipments as cover. For every resource we sent to the Concordat, we kept a percentage hidden. We recruited scientists who were willing to disappear from public life. And they never suspected? Why would they?" Okonkwo spoke for the first time since they had landed. "They see us as primitives, children playing with technology we barely understand. They monitor our official facilities, our registered ships. They don't imagine we could be building something without their knowledge." He paused, his expression darkening. "That arrogance has been our greatest ally. They forgot that humans spent our entire history fighting each other. We know war in ways they have forgotten. We know how to hide. We know how to wait, and we know how to strike." Tanaka thought about this. 200 ships against their thousands. Even with better technology, the numbers are misleading, Vasquez interrupted. She brought up a tactical analysis. "The Concordat's main battle fleet hasn't fought a real engagement in 6,000 years. Most of their ships are ceremonial. Their crews have never faced anything more dangerous than unarmed protesters. Meanwhile, our pilots have been training for combat every day for decades." She zoomed in on the Concordat's fleet distribution. "More importantly, their forces are spread across a galaxy. It would take them weeks to concentrate their military power. If we strike fast, strike smart, and inspire others to join us, the numbers change very quickly." Tanaka nodded slowly. The plan was insane. It was also the only hope they had. Over the following weeks, Tanaka threw herself into preparation. She trained with the new ships, learning their capabilities. She studied Concordat tactics and found them predictable, almost lazy. She worked with intelligence officers who had spent years building networks throughout concordate space. The networks told a story of quiet desperation. Dozens of species had been conquered and subjugated over the millennia. The Delth, an aquatic people, had once ruled a beautiful water world. Now they processed fish in factories owned by concordate interests, their culture nearly forgotten. The Morin, beings of living silicon, had been the galaxy's greatest miners. Now they worked themselves to death in tunnels, extracting resources they would never benefit from. These species had stopped fighting long ago. They had stopped hoping, but they had not stopped remembering. Tanaka began making contact. It was dangerous work. Concordate surveillance was everywhere. But she found willing allies among the desperate and the angry. She found leaders who still dreamed of freedom, even if they no longer believed it was possible. Meanwhile, on Earth, life continued under concordate rule. The Cultural Harmonization Program began 3 months after the permanent status announcement. Concordate educators arrived at schools to teach children that their traditions were primitive, their languages inefficient, their religions superstitious. Human history was rewritten to emphasize humanity's failures and the Concordate's benevolence. Parents watched their children come home speaking Concordate phrases, dismissing human customs as backward. Communities that had preserved traditions for centuries were told to abandon them. When they refused, enforcers arrived. Tanaka received reports of these actions in her hidden headquarters. Each one added fuel to the fire burning in her chest. She was reviewing one such report when Zen found her. The Kethri translator had been transferred to Tanaka's official station after the announcement. They worked together frequently now, and Tanaka had begun to see her initial observations confirmed. Zen was troubled by what the Concordate was doing. "Captain," Zen said, their feathers ruffling nervously, "I need to speak with you, privately." Tanaka led them to a secure room, away from monitoring devices. She activated a jammer that Quiet Dawn technicians had built. It would appear as a simple technical malfunction to Concordate systems. "What is it?" Zen's large eyes darted around the room. "I have been reviewing Earth's resource reports. The numbers do not match." Tanaka kept her expression neutral. "What do you mean?" "The tribute shipments account for only 80% of Earth's estimated production. The rest is listed as waste, as accidents, as processing loss. But the percentages are too consistent, too perfect." Zen leaned forward. "Someone is hiding resources, a great many resources." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Zen said something that surprised Tanaka. "I will not report this." Tanaka studied the alien carefully. "Why?" Zen's feathers flattened against their body, a gesture Tanaka had learned to recognize as distress. "Because I have seen what we do," they said quietly. "I have translated orders for enforcement actions. I have watched families separated. I have seen children taken from parents who refuse to abandon their beliefs." Their voice cracked. "The Concordate tells us we are bringing order, bringing civilization. But I have studied human history. I have read your philosophers and poets. Your civilization is not primitive. It is simply different." They looked at Tanaka with an intensity that was almost painful. "I do not know what you are planning. I do not want to know. But I want you to understand that not all of us believe in what the Concordate is doing. Some of us are trapped, just like you." Tanaka made a decision. It was a risk, but her instincts told her it was the right one. "If the time comes," she said carefully, "there may be a way for you to help. Would you be willing?" Zen's feathers lifted slightly. "Hope. Yes, whatever it takes." Tanaka nodded. "Then wait, watch, and when I call on you, be ready." 2 days later, the news arrived that changed everything. The colony of New Geneva, a settlement on Mars with 50,000 residents, had organized a protest against cultural harmonization. The protest had been peaceful. It had been orderly. It had accomplished nothing. High Arbiter Vethka announced that New Geneva would face a punitive action. The colony's food supplies would be seized. Its power grid would be shut down for 30 days. Medical services would be suspended. 50,000 people, men, women, children, left to freeze and starve in the Martian cold. Tanaka read the announcement in her quarters. Her hands were shaking. She thought about her brother. She thought about the 3 who died at Atacama. She thought about generations of service species who had been crushed under concordate rule. Then she contacted Director Okonkwo. "Sir," she said, "I believe it's time." There was a long pause on the other end of the communication. "Yes," Okonkwo replied. "I believe it is." The order went out through hidden channels, encrypted in ways the Concordate had never imagined. Across the solar system, in asteroid bases, in hollow moons and abandoned stations, crews received the message and began final preparations. 200 ships powered up their engines. 30 years of patience was about to end, and humanity was about to remind the galaxy what it meant to fight for freedom. The Concordate punitive fleet approached Mars with the casual confidence of predators who had never known fear. 30 ships, bristling with weapons designed to intimidate rather than destroy. They expected no resistance. They expected submission. Captain Yuki Tanaka watched them from the bridge of the Prometheus, the flagship of Earth's hidden fleet. Around her, officers worked at their stations with focused intensity. The air hummed with barely contained energy. "Distance to target fleet, 50,000 kilometers, Lieutenant Chen reported. They're maintaining standard approach formation. No indication they've detected us." Tanaka nodded. The Concordate ships were using passive sensors only. Why waste power on active scans when their prey couldn't possibly fight back? They were about to learn otherwise. "Signal the fleet," Tanaka ordered. "Decloak on my command." The word went out across secure channels. 200 ships, hidden throughout the asteroid field between Mars and Jupiter, prepared to reveal themselves. 30 years of secrecy was about to end. Tanaka took a deep breath. She thought about her brother. She thought about the colonists of New Geneva waiting to freeze and starve. She thought about every humiliation humanity had endured. Then she gave the order. "Decloak!" The universe seemed to shift. All around the Concordate punitive fleet, space itself rippled as human ships dropped their concealment fields. They emerged from nothing like ghosts becoming solid, their dark hulls gleaming with weapons arrays that the Concordate had never seen. For a moment, nothing happened. Tanaka could imagine the confusion on the Concordate bridges, the impossible readings, the sudden realization that everything they believed was wrong. Then the Concordate commander's voice crackled over the communication channel, translated by automated systems. "Unidentified vessels, you are in violation of integration protocol. Stand down immediately or face." Tanaka opened her own channel, broadcasting on every frequency. "Concordate fleet. This is Captain Yuki Tanaka of the Earth Defense Force. You have one chance to surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted to a holding area. Any hostile action will be met with overwhelming force." Silence, then laughter. "You dare threaten us?" The Concordate commander's voice dripped with contempt. "Primitive animals. We will crush you and add your rebellion to the list of failures in your pathetic history. All ships engage and destroy." The Concordate fleet began to move, their weapons charging. Tanaka felt a strange calm settle over her. This was the moment. This was what 30 years had been building toward. "All ships," she said. "Disable, don't destroy. Show them what we can do." The human fleet moved like a single organism. They were faster than the Concordate ships, more agile, more precise. Their weapons fired beams of energy that the Concordate shields couldn't stop. They passed through like light through glass and struck the systems underneath. The first Concordate ship lost engine power, then another, then 5 more. Tanaka watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. It wasn't really a battle, it was a demonstration. Human ships danced around the Concordate vessels, disabling weapons and engines with surgical precision. Not one Concordate ship was destroyed. Not one Concordate crew member died. In 12 minutes, it was over. 30 Concordate ships drifted helplessly in space, their systems dark, their crews trapped and unharmed. The punitive fleet that had come to starve 50,000 colonists had been rendered completely impotent without a single death. Tanaka opened a broadcast channel. This time, she spoke not just to the defeated fleet, but to the entire galaxy. She knew Concordate monitoring systems would pick up her words. She wanted them to. "We are not slaves," she said. "We are not servants. We are humanity, and we choose our own path." To the Galactic Concordate, Your time of tyranny is ending. To every species living under your rule, look at what we have done. Look at what is possible. You are not alone." She paused, letting the words sink in across light years of space. "We do not seek conquest. We do not seek revenge. We seek only freedom for ourselves and for every being who has been chained by the Concordate's arrogance. Join us, rise with us, and together we will build something better." The broadcast ended. Tanaka turned to her officers. "Begin recovery operations. Bring the disabled ships to safe harbor. Treat their crews with dignity." Lieutenant Chen looked confused. "Captain, they came to destroy a colony. They've killed our people for years. Why show them mercy?" Tanaka thought about her brother again, about the anger that had burned in her chest for so long, about the choice she was making. "Because we're not them," she said. "We're better than them, and we're going to prove it." The response to Tanaka's broadcast was immediate and galaxy-wide. On the Delth homeworld, a water planet called Thessaly Prime, workers in the fish processing plants stopped their machines. For the first time in 9,000 years, they gathered in public spaces and spoke the old words that had been forbidden. Within hours, they had seized control of the orbital stations that kept them subjugated. On the Moran mining colonies, silicon beings who had been worked nearly to death put down their tools and refused to continue. When Concordate enforcers arrived, they found the tunnels blocked and the miners united. The Moran had remembered how to fight. Across dozens of worlds, service species saw what humanity had done and found something they had lost long ago: hope. The Concordate High Council convened an emergency session on their capital world of Nexus Prime. Tanaka would later learn what happened in that meeting from intercepted communications. The council was composed of the 12 most powerful species in the Concordate, ancient races who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They had grown comfortable in their dominance. They had forgotten that power could be challenged. Now they were terrified. "How is this possible?" demanded one council member, a crystalline being who represented the Vorthax. "Humans are primitives. Their technology was barely functional 30 years ago." "They hid their development from us," replied another, a floating cloud of gas that served as the Nebulan representative. "They deceived us for decades. Then they must be punished." This came from a massive armored creature called a Thalkor. "We will send the main fleet. We will burn their world to ash." High Arbiter Vethka, connected by holographic link from Earth, spoke carefully. "I advise caution. The humans showed remarkable restraint in their attack. They disabled our ships but killed no one. This suggests they do not want total war." "You have failed us, Vethka," the Vorthax representative said coldly. "You were supposed to keep them controlled. I kept them compliant for 30 years. No one suspected. And now they have a fleet that can defeat our ships. Your failure is complete." The council voted. The decision was unanimous. The Concordate's main battle fleet, 600 warships, the largest military force assembled in 3,000 years, would converge on Earth. The human rebellion would be crushed so thoroughly that no species would ever dare to resist again. Tanaka received intelligence of the fleet's deployment through the network she had built. 600 ships. Even with superior technology, the numbers were daunting. But humanity was not fighting alone anymore. Zen arrived at Tanaka's command ship 2 days after the Mars victory. The Kethri translator had stolen a shuttle and fled Concordate control, bringing with them valuable intelligence about the approaching fleet. "They're scared," Zen said. "I have never seen the council so frightened. They are used to obedience, not resistance. They don't know how to fight a real war." Tanaka studied the tactical data Zen had brought. "Their fleet is spread across multiple staging areas. It will take them 3 weeks to concentrate their forces." "That gives you time." "Time for what?" Zen's feathers ruffled. "To convince others to join you. The service species are watching. They need to see that standing against the Concordate is possible." Tanaka understood. The battle at Mars had been a spark. Now they needed to fan it into a fire. Over the following days, human ships made contact with uprising forces across the galaxy. They shared technology, provided tactical advice, and most importantly, offered solidarity. The message was always the same: you are not alone. The Delth formally allied with humanity, their waterworld's formidable defenses now pointed at the Concordate. The Moran pledged their support, using their control of crucial mining operations as leverage. Smaller species, seeing the tide turning, began to add their voices to the chorus of resistance. When the Concordat fleet finally arrived at Earth, they found not just 200 human ships waiting for them, they found 400. Ships from a dozen species, flying in formation with human vessels, united against a common oppressor. It was the largest combined fleet the galaxy had seen in 10,000 years, and it had come together in less than a month. Director Okonkwo broadcast a final offer to the Concordat commander. "Turn back," he said. "This war doesn't have to continue. We offer peace. We offer negotiation. We offer a future where all species can thrive together as equals." The Concordat commander's response was to order the attack. The battle for Earth began. It was brutal. It was chaotic. It was everything Tanaka had trained for, and nothing like she had imagined. Concordat ships outnumbered the Allied fleet, but they fought like individuals while the Allies fought like a team. Human tactical coordination, developed through decades of secret preparation, proved devastatingly effective. Concordat vessels were disabled in waves, their systems overloaded by weapons they couldn't counter. But the Concordat had numbers, and numbers mattered. Allied ships were destroyed. Human ships were destroyed. Tanaka watched friends die on her tactical display, their vessels becoming nothing but expanding clouds of debris. She pushed down her grief and kept fighting. The battle lasted 9 hours. When it finally ended, the Concordat fleet had been shattered. Of 600 ships, only 90 remained functional, and those had surrendered when their commander's flagship was disabled. The Allied fleet had lost nearly 100 vessels. Thousands were dead, but they had won. Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and looked at the field of debris that surrounded Earth. Somewhere out there, among the wreckage, were people who had believed in freedom enough to die for it. She would not waste their sacrifice. "Signal the council," she said quietly. "Tell them it's over. Tell them we want to talk." The war was finished. Now came the harder part, deciding what to build in its place. The flagship of the Concordat High Council drifted silently in space, its engines cold, its weapons dark. The most powerful vessel in the galaxy had been reduced to a floating prison for those who had once ruled the stars. Captain Yuki Tanaka walked its corridors with an armed escort, though she doubted she needed one. The crew members she passed looked broken. They had never imagined defeat. They had never prepared for a universe where their dominance could be challenged. High Arbiter Vethka waited in the ship's command center. The insectoid stood motionless, his compound eyes watching Tanaka approach. He had been transferred from Earth to the flagship just before the battle, intended to observe humanity's final punishment. Instead, he had watched his entire civilization's power crumble in 9 hours. "Captain Tanaka," he said. His voice was flat. "I suppose you have come to gloat." Tanaka shook her head. "I've come to talk." She dismissed her escort and faced Vethka alone. Around them, the command center's screens showed the aftermath of the battle. Debris fields, disabled ships, the wreckage of Concordat supremacy. 12,000 years, Vethka said quietly. For 12,000 years, the Concordat brought order to the galaxy. We ended wars between species. We created stable trade routes. We preserved countless civilizations from destroying themselves. "You also enslaved dozens of species," Tanaka replied. "You stripped them of their cultures, their freedom, their dignity. You called it guidance. It was tyranny. It was necessary." Vethka's mandibles clicked together. "You do not understand. Before the Concordat, the galaxy was chaos. Species destroyed each other over resources, over territory, over beliefs. Billions died in wars that accomplished nothing. We brought peace. You brought submission. There's a difference." Vethka was silent for a long moment. Then he asked a question that surprised Tanaka. "What will you do with us?" Tanaka had been thinking about this question for a long time. In the days since the battle, as the Allied fleet secured Concordat space and accepted the surrender of remaining forces, she had argued about it with Okonkwo, with Zen, with leaders of the other liberated species. There were those who wanted revenge. The Delth had suffered for 9,000 years, the Morin for 11,000. Countless species had been robbed of their histories, their traditions, their identities. They had earned the right to demand retribution. But Tanaka remembered her brother. She remembered the anger that had driven her for years. She remembered how that anger had felt like strength, when really it had been just another kind of chain. "We're not going to do anything to you," she said. Vethka's compound eyes widened. "I do not understand." "We're not going to execute you. We're not going to enslave you. We're not going to strip away your culture and force you to forget who you are." Tanaka stepped closer. "We're going to do something much harder. We're going to let you go." "Let us go. After everything, the Concordat is finished. Your fleet is destroyed. Your authority is broken. The species you ruled are free now, and they're not going back to chains." Tanaka's voice was firm. "But we didn't fight this war to become what we defeated. We fought for freedom, real freedom, and that means you're free too." Vethka stared at her as if she were speaking a language he couldn't translate. "You would show us mercy after we killed your people? After we enslaved your world?" "Mercy isn't about what you deserve. It's about who we choose to be." The words hung in the air between them. "Your brother," Vethka said slowly. "I read the reports. He died during a tribute collection. My soldiers killed him for protecting medical supplies." Tanaka felt the old pain rise in her chest. She let it come. She didn't fight it. "Yes," she said, "they did. And you still offer mercy?" Tanaka thought about Kenji, about his smile, about the way he had always believed the best about people, even when they didn't deserve it, about the kind of man he had been, and the kind of person he would have wanted her to become. "My brother was a healer," she said. "He dedicated his life to helping others. He would be ashamed of me if I used his death as an excuse to become a killer." She met Vethka's eyes. "So yes, I offer mercy, not for your sake, for his." Something changed in Vethka's posture. The rigid certainty that had defined him seemed to soften, just slightly. "I do not know how to live in a universe without the Concordat," he admitted. "I do not know who my people are if we are not rulers." "Then learn," Tanaka said. "Figure it out. That's what freedom means, the chance to decide for yourself who you want to be." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "We're calling a conference on Earth, representatives from every species, Concordat and service alike. We're going to build something new, a real partnership where every voice matters. I'd like you to be there." "Why?" "Because the new galaxy we're building needs to include everyone, even you." Tanaka allowed herself a small smile. "Besides, someone has to explain what went wrong with the old system. Who better than someone who believed in it?" She left Vethka alone with his thoughts. The conference convened 2 weeks later in the old United Nations building. It had been cleared of Concordat equipment and restored to something like its original purpose, a place where different peoples came together to find common ground. Representatives from over 50 species filled the Great Hall. Former rulers sat beside former slaves. Ancient enemies shared tables. The air hummed with translation systems working overtime to bridge 100 different languages. Director Samuel Okonkwo opened the proceedings. The old man looked tired but satisfied. He had worked for this moment for 30 years. He had earned the right to see it. "We gather here not as victors and defeated," he said. "We gather as equals. The old order is gone. What we build in its place will define the galaxy for generations to come." The debates that followed were intense. The Delth wanted guarantees that their water world would never again be exploited. The Morin demanded reparations for centuries of forced labor. Smaller species worried that they would simply trade one set of overlords for another. Tanaka spoke when her turn came. She had been elected to represent humanity, though she still wasn't sure she deserved the honor. "I understand the anger in this room," she said. "Humanity suffered under the Concordat for only 30 years. Many of you suffered for millennia. You have every right to demand justice." She paused, looking around at the gathered representatives. "But I want to ask a question. What kind of justice do we want? Do we want revenge? Do we want to make them suffer as we suffered? We could do that. We have the power now." She shook her head. "I don't think that's who we are. I don't think that's who any of us want to be." The Concordat ruled through fear and dominance. They believed that power meant control, that strength meant subjugation. They were wrong. Tanaka straightened. "True strength is choosing to build instead of destroy. True power is lifting others up instead of pushing them down. If we become conquerors, we haven't won anything. We've just changed the names of the tyrants. She looked at Vethka, who sat with the other former Concordat leaders. He was watching her intently. I propose something different. I propose we create a real partnership. No tribute species, no rulers and ruled. Every world has a voice. Every species has dignity. We share knowledge freely. We help each other grow. When there are conflicts, we solve them through negotiation, not force. And if someone breaks the rules? The Delth representative asked. If some species tries to conquer others? Then we stand together to stop them, not to subjugate them, to stop them. There's a difference between keeping the peace and keeping control. The debates continued for days. There were arguments and compromises, breakthroughs and setbacks. Slowly, painfully, a new structure began to emerge. They called it the Free Assembly of Worlds. Every species would have representation. Decisions would be made by consensus whenever possible, by majority vote when necessary. No species could impose tribute on another. No culture could be suppressed. Trade would be fair, based on mutual benefit rather than coercion. It wasn't perfect. Nothing built by imperfect beings ever is, but it was better than what had come before. On the final day of the conference, Vethka approached Tanaka. The insectoid moved slowly, as if carrying a great weight. I have been thinking about what you said, he told her, about mercy, about choosing who we want to be. Tanaka waited. For 12,000 years, I believed the Concordat's way was the only way. Strength meant domination. Order meant control. I thought we were protecting the galaxy. His mandibles clicked softly. I was wrong. That's a hard thing to admit. Yes, it is. Vethka straightened. I would like to help, not to lead, not to control, just to help. I have knowledge of systems and resources that could benefit the Free Assembly. I would like to offer it. Tanaka considered this. Some would say she was a fool to trust him. Maybe they were right. But she remembered what Okonkwo had told her back at the beginning. We will need people who can win a war without becoming monsters. Winning the war had been the easy part. Building the peace, that was the real challenge, and building required everyone who was willing to work. Welcome to the Free Assembly, she said. That night, Tanaka stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Earth's lights sparkled below her, but for the first time in 30 years, they weren't the only lights she could see. Ships from a dozen species orbited overhead, their running lights blinking like new stars. Zen joined her, their feathers gleaming in the darkness. You look thoughtful, the Kethri said. I'm thinking about choices, Tanaka replied. All the choices we made to get here, all the choices we still have to make. Do you regret any of them? Tanaka thought about her brother, about the soldiers who had killed him, about Vethka, who had commanded those soldiers, about the mercy she had offered and the mercy she had received. No, she said finally. I don't think I do. Zen stood beside her in comfortable silence. Above them, the new stars shone bright. The hard work was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, the future looked like something worth fighting for. 1 year had passed since the fall of the Concordat. Captain Yuki Tanaka, Admiral Tanaka now, though she still wasn't used to the title, stood in the observation lounge of Unity Station. The massive structure orbited Earth, its docking rings filled with ships from across the galaxy. Through the wide windows, she could see vessels of every shape and size coming and going, Delth cruisers that moved like living water. Morin freighters carved from living crystal, human ships flying alongside former enemies who had become friends. The galaxy was healing, slowly, painfully, but genuinely healing. Admiral, a young officer approached with a tablet. The delegation from the outer territories has arrived. They're requesting to join the Free Assembly. Tanaka smiled. Another group seeking freedom. Another people ready to build something better. 3 months ago, there had been 47 member species in the Assembly. Now there were 63 and more joining every week. Show them to the Welcome Center, she said. I'll meet with them this afternoon. The officer nodded and hurried away. Tanaka returned to watching the ships. So much had changed in a year. The old Concordat tribute routes had been transformed into free trade corridors. Species that had been forbidden from developing advanced technology were now learning and growing, supported by those who had already achieved it. The knowledge that the Concordat had hoarded for millennia was being shared openly. There had been challenges, of course. Some former Concordat powers had resisted the changes. A faction calling itself the Restoration had tried to seize control of several key systems 3 months ago. The Free Assembly's peacekeeping fleet, commanded by Tanaka herself, had responded not with destruction, but with containment. The rebels had been isolated, negotiated with, and eventually convinced that their way was not the only way. Not one ship had been destroyed in the conflict. Not one life lost. It was a point of pride for Tanaka and a message to the galaxy. The new order would defend itself, but it would not become what it had replaced. She left the observation lounge and made her way to the conference center where the Free Assembly's Executive Council was meeting. The halls of Unity Station were filled with beings of every description. A group of young Kethri students passed her, chattering excitedly about an exchange program that would send them to Earth universities. A Moran elder sat in a meditation alcove, their silicon form humming softly. Two former Concordat officers, now serving in the peacekeeping fleet, saluted as Tanaka passed. The council chamber was a circle of seats with no head of the table. That was intentional. No species sat above another. Representatives from the 12 founding worlds were gathered, including Director Okonkwo, who served as humanity's senior ambassador. He looked more tired than he had a year ago. The work of building a new civilization took its toll, even on someone as resilient as him. The trade agreement with the outer territories is ready for approval, Okonkwo said. Equal exchange rates, no tariffs on essential goods, mutual development assistance. It's everything we hoped for. The Delth representative, a graceful being whose body seemed to flow like liquid, nodded approval. Our engineers have completed the water purification systems for the Moran colonies. They will be delivered next month. And the cultural restoration projects? Asked a Kethri delegate, Zen, who had risen to become one of their people's most respected voices in the assembly. Ahead of schedule, replied a Moran elder. 17 species have recovered significant portions of their lost heritage. The archives the Concordat confiscated are being returned. Tanaka listened to the reports with quiet satisfaction. This was what victory really looked like. Not conquered enemies or burning cities, but schools opening and trade flourishing, and ancient cultures being reborn. But there was one more piece of business. There's been a development, Tanaka said when her turn came. High Arbiter Vethka has requested permission to address the assembly. The chamber fell silent. Vethka had spent the past year working quietly in the archives, helping to catalog and return stolen cultural artifacts. He had not sought attention or influence. He had simply worked day after day, trying to repair some small fraction of the damage his civilization had caused. What does he want to say? Okonkwo asked. He hasn't told me, but I think we should hear him out. The council agreed, though not without hesitation. Some wounds were still fresh, some memories still painful. Vethka entered the chamber slowly. The insectoid had changed in the past year. His movements were less certain, his presence less imposing. He looked like someone who had lost everything he believed in and was still trying to find his footing. He stood in the center of the circle and addressed the representatives. I come before you not to ask forgiveness, he said. What the Concordat did cannot be forgiven with words. It can only be answered with actions, over generations, through the slow work of repair. His compound eyes moved around the chamber, meeting the gaze of each representative in turn. I was a believer. For my entire life, I believed that the Concordat's way was right. That order required control, that lesser species needed guidance. I enforced laws that destroyed families. I approved actions that erased cultures. I thought I was helping. He paused. I was wrong, not just factually wrong, but morally wrong. I caused suffering that cannot be undone. I participated in systems that treated living beings as resources to be managed rather than people to be respected. Vethka's voice grew stronger. This past year, I have worked in the archives. I have seen what we took, not just resources and labor, but songs and stories and sacred traditions. We didn't just rule these species. We tried to erase them. We told ourselves it was for their own good. We lied. He straightened to his full height. I am here to offer a formal apology on behalf of the Concordat, not because it erases what we did, but because it acknowledges the truth. We were tyrants. We were wrong. And the galaxy is better because we were stopped. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the Delth representative rose. Their people had suffered longer than almost anyone under Concordat rule. 9,000 years of subjugation, countless generations born into service. High Arbiter Vethka, they said, the Delth do not forget what was done to us. We will never forget. Vethka bowed his head. But, the Delth continued, we also choose not to be defined by hatred. The waters of memory carry both the bitter and the sweet. We accept your apology. We do not offer absolution, but we offer something more valuable, the chance to move forward together. One by one, other representatives added their voices. The Morin, the Kethri, species that had been crushed under Concordat rule for millennia. They did not forget. They did not pretend the past had not happened, but they chose to build rather than destroy. Tanaka watched it happen with tears in her eyes. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy, not superior technology, not military strength, not the ability to destroy. The gift was the simple, powerful idea that mercy was possible, that enemies could become partners, that the cycle of conquest and revenge could be broken. After the session ended, Tanaka found Okonkwo sitting alone in a quiet alcove. The old man looked exhausted but at peace. You did it, she said, sitting beside him. 30 years of planning, and you did it. Okonkwo smiled weakly. We did it, all of us. I just got the ball rolling. How does it feel? He considered the question. Like finishing a book I spent my whole life writing. Satisfying. A little sad. He looked at her. But mostly grateful. Grateful that I lived to see it. Tanaka understood. Okonkwo was old. He wouldn't be here forever. But what he had helped build would outlast him by millennia. What happens now, she asked. Now we keep building. We make mistakes and fix them. We argue and compromise and sometimes get it wrong. We do the hard, boring, beautiful work of maintaining a civilization that actually deserves to exist. He put a hand on her shoulder. And we trust the next generation to carry it forward. 6 months later, Tanaka attended the launch of the first joint exploration mission, a ship crewed by beings from 20 different species, setting out into unknown space to discover what lay beyond the mapped territories. Zen was there, serving as cultural liaison. Vethka had helped design the ship's diplomatic protocols. Engineers from Earth, Delth, and Morin had built the engines together. The ship was called the Unity. It seemed fitting. Tanaka watched it launch from the observation deck of Unity Station, surrounded by representatives from across the galaxy. The vessel's lights blinked once, twice, and then it was gone, jumping into faster-than-light travel toward mysteries that no species had ever explored. Behind her, children were playing. Human children, Kethri children, even a few young Concordat species who had never known their people as rulers. They didn't see former enemies. They just saw friends. Tanaka thought about her brother, about the choice she had made to honor his memory through mercy instead of vengeance, about the galaxy that choice had helped create. Kenji would have loved this, she thought. He would have loved every minute of it. She smiled and turned away from the window. There was work to do. There was always more work to do. But for the first time in human history, it was work that truly mattered. The stars had been redrawn, not in blood, but in hope, and the galaxy would never be the same. 50 years later, historians would write about the Liberation War. They would analyze the battles and the strategies, the politics and the compromises. They would debate whether humanity had been lucky or brilliant, whether the Concordat had been truly evil or merely misguided. But the children who grew up in the Free Assembly didn't care about those debates. They knew only one thing. The universe they lived in was one where different beings worked together, where cultures were celebrated instead of suppressed, where freedom was not just a word but a reality. And when they asked how it had come to be, their parents told them a simple story. Once, a small species called humanity was chained by an ancient empire. They could have accepted their fate. They could have surrendered. They could have become bitter and vengeful. Instead, they chose to be better. They rose. They fought. They won. And then they showed the galaxy that true strength was not found in conquest, but in compassion. Not in dominance, but in dignity. Not in breaking others, but in building together. They redrew the stars, and the stars never forgot.